Welcome to David and David on Real Estate. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the real estate market.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to podcast number 5. And David, does time not fly when you're having fun?
Yeah, 5 podcasts already, and in a busy spring market, but it's good. I look forward to these every week. It's very exciting. I know you got lots of information for us today.
Today is going to be a great podcast. We're going to talk about whether you should be buying a property in this market, whether it's a good idea or not. But before we jump into it, just a quick recap of what the market is doing. And it's still really busy out there, despite the provincial lockdown order, the stay-at-home order. We're still seeing a lot of appointments. We're still seeing a lot of offers. It's still a very strong seller's market, and we are still experiencing a lack of inventory out there, which completely makes sense. Sellers are still wary about listing and about having people and buyers in their homes. So it is causing a situation where we have low inventory levels and high demand for real estate. So we are still in a really strong seller's market. We are seeing appointments still be spread out across the board, and we still are seeing buyers out there showing. Offers are coming in. The market is stabilizing a little bit, but there's still lots of transactions being done out there.
Well, that's good. You've got to keep your office busy. Got to keep my office busy, and it's an exciting time for buyers and for sellers out there.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. Well, last week we talked about, the last couple of podcasts we were talking about what happens when deals go bad, and what happened when the buyer defaults, what happened if a seller defaults, and we talked about remorse, seller's remorse, and can you do that? You don't like the deal you made, can you pull the plug on a transaction? And basically the answer is no. And we're talking about whether or not you can get specific performance as a remedy, which is a buyer, going to get a court order requiring the seller to sell. And I told you it's a really tough thing to get because you have to show there's some uniqueness to that property and you couldn't be compensated in damages, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a very rare thing. So we do this, our podcast on Wednesday. Thursday morning, we have our weekly lawyers meeting in our office. And the issue comes up because 2 of the lawyers in our office were just involved in a classic specific performance type of claim. So I got to relay the story to you because these don't come up that often, and we got a successful conclusion to it. So I got to tell you about it. So we're on the buyer's side of this, right. And the clients sign to purchase this house, this very important house to them. They signed an agreement at the end of March. It's supposed to close late June or early July or something. And the buyers even had a right to accelerate the closing and move it up. And they contacted, because they were in the process of marketing and selling their own property.
Right.
So they contact the seller, say, we want to exercise a right to move it up 30 days. The seller balks, but they do agree to an amendment at a certain date. They didn't move it up as much, but they moved it up and they agreed to it, even an amendment. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we get a letter from their lawyer saying seller doesn't want to close. No reason, nothing. And we're in, this was a week ago, so we're in early May and it's supposed to close in June. No reason, but they don't want to close. They're not giving us specifics, but they've changed their mind. So our lawyers, get to work on it because, as I explained to you, a lot of it depends on the actual facts of the situation. What do they know? What do they not know? And everything. So we write back a letter because we have to explain all this to them that we're going to be ready, willing, and able. We got our finance in order. We're going to be able to close it. You can't do this. And we're not saying that we're not allowing the transaction to be terminated. We're right. Requiring that they complete the contract. And if they don't complete the contract, we're certainly going to reserve our rights to sue them, but what we're going to really sue for, not just for damages, but for specific performance, because there's a uniqueness to this property. So some of the background to this is the property was being bought by a couple. They've got elderly parents who were going to move in with them. There was a pool in the backyard. It was a bungalow. There was no stairs. It was a property that the elderly parents could easily get around outside, inside. So it physically met a lot of the needs that they had. The same day that we find out that the seller doesn't want to sell the property, one of these elderly parents passes away. And so the family's dealing with this, so the elderly father passed away. The mother's still going to move in with them. She's a person in a wheelchair. This is known to the seller. She needs an accessible property, and this happens to be an accessible property. It's close to the school where their daughter has to go to. It's close to their work, and it's a property without a renovation that the elderly mom can get around. So there's that as part of an important part of the fact that it was a bungalow. They needed the proximity of the home, the nature of the home, the fact there's no stairs, and all this has been communicated to the sellers. The sellers know about this, and they also know that the buyers put their own property on the market because we had this clause allowing the accelerated closing. So they're aware of all these facts. So they know that the buyer is relying on the seller to close this, for this. So we push it on all this basis, putting this all out there. The mother's, bedridden, she needs wheelchair access, all that. This was all known to them. And based on that, we're pushing in a letter that went on for about 4 or 5 pages, laying out all these facts that damages isn't enough. We can't go out and find another property like this that we're going to be able to move into with this type of timing. And we need this property. It's known, we're relying on it. This is one. So if there's ever a case for specific performance, this is meeting a lot of the criteria. There's a uniqueness, there's the right fact situation, seller has knowledge. And beyond all this, we got no valid reason. There usually isn't a valid reason why the seller doesn't want to sell. They can't just back out. They can get an offer from someone else. So anyways, we take a very aggressive position. We consult with a litigation lawyer. We let them know that we've consulted with a litigation lawyer, and that if they don't agree to these teams and firm up, that's the route we're going to have to go. And I'll tell you, any litigation lawyer on specific performance is going to want a retainer of $10,000, $20,000 because they got to get in court quickly. A lot of material has to be filed, and they got to do a lot of research and build their case. So those type of costs can be incurred easily on both sides. Okay, and the seller is going to be ultimately responsible for the buyer's costs for litigating if it has to go that route. Right. So they have to let them know the seller's facing all this, and that make the case to their lawyer that they're not likely to succeed. They're going to end up selling the house to us anyways, and they're going to incur all these additional costs. So this went on, 4 or 5 page letter, laid it all out. Gave them a little bit of time to ponder it, and got a response back that they've decided they're going to go ahead and close the transaction. So we got a fabulous result.
The deterrent factor here is huge, right? Because when you lay it out like that, there is a uniqueness to this property. There is a reason. The seller was informed. They understand that throughout the negotiation process, this is really what's happening. The house is being bought for this specific purpose. There's multiple parties involved. It's a bungalow. It's an accessible property. And then when you lay it out like that and you consult a litigation lawyer, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars in the line here. That really acts as a deterrent point and a pressure point to really get the seller to perform even before it hits the courts, even before it escalates, even before anything else happens. So, having that kind of guidance and direction is so important to a buyer in this case.
Yeah, no, it was huge. We were so excited to get that response back, to sort of win the battle without it going to litigation, because that would have been an awful experience. You just can't imagine this family with what they've gone through recently. Okay, the trauma of losing one of the elderly parents in the middle of COVID. This was a sudden thing, and at the same time, their transactions up in the air, their deposits up in the air. They can't go on the market and just find a comparable house for their purposes. There was a uniqueness here that made pushing for specific performance something that you could validly get. It's not just a typical house that you don't get this one, you go down the block and there's another one like it. So anyways, it's funny, these don't come up very often, but we raise it one day and then the next day we've got one. And that's the way we have to operate.
Universe, right?
Yeah. And I couldn't be prouder of the way the lawyers in our office handled it. They got on it right away. They did the fact gathering. They wrote a fabulous letter that was hard for the other side to say no to, because they just took away all the arguments that they would be making before they even had a chance to make them. So anyways, it was a good result. So I'm happy to be able to share that with you and all our podcast listeners.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, David. And I really enjoy hearing these stories because it puts into practice all the theory and everything that we talk about, right? And it's really rewarding to see these come to fruition without going down the whole court pathway, right? Because once things go down and get filed with the courts and get into the hands of a litigation lawyer, your fate is really decided by a third party, and that's probably the worst situation to be in as a buyer or seller.
Yeah, no matter how good your facts are, or that you think you're in the right, you never know for sure, because sometimes you might have a lot of the facts, but there might be a legal argument that can be made or something, and you just never know. There's that level of uncertainty, and that's so uncomfortable. And we got to remember, like, these aren't just things that happen on paper or electronically. These are people's lives. These are people where people want to live, and and these homes that you guys go find for them as an agent are to fill certain needs. And sometimes it's a handful of needs. Sometimes it's 20 different needs, and you got to find the right place for people to live that fills all these. And here's a unique situation. So you really feel for the family and the people involved when they're in this. And how many homes are they going to buy in their lifetime, and transactions are they going to involve? It's not like me and you that we're dealing with transactions every day. Most people, it's a handful of transactions in their lifetime, and it's to feed their personal needs. I'm not talking about investors. I know we're going to talk about investors and things too, but I'm just talking about just where people's homes, where they're going to live.
And I think when the issue of specific performance comes to the table, and you are talking about those unique properties, I think they change hands even less times, right? Because once a buyer buys one of these properties that's unique to them and important to them, they don't sell it. They hold on to it. The kids grow up in the house and becomes a generational home. And there could be a lot of examples of these, but a bungalow with accessibility issues is certainly one of them. A family that buys a house like this, the chances of them transacting every year or every 2 years or even every 5 years is so much less, just because that house really fits their lifestyle and is really adaptable to what they really need. So the uniqueness factor of that property probably makes it that they're going to hold on to it for quite some time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a uniqueness that's important to them, and it may not be important to a lot of other people, but it's a subjective test that we look at. They're buying this house to fill their needs, and in this case, or in any specific form, the fact that the seller was given all this information and knew the family situation and knew all that is an important consideration too. So,
what would happen, David, theoretically, if the buyers were negotiating this transaction and they kept all that information, all that personal information, the personal reasons for buying the property private, and when the seller reneged on the contract, only then did they disclose? Would that change the outcome of the situation?
yeah, it might. It might. If I was on the other side, if I was on the seller side, I would take that position, because you're sort of in an undefensible position, but you're looking for something. But that's something you'd be looking at. Well, we didn't know anything that this was a unique property. We're just selling a bungalow as is, where is. We didn't go through a process of showing you or marketing it that it's wheelchair accessible or things like that. We didn't know that was important to you. You weren't relying on any information that we gave you for that. You may have been looking at 100 bungalows somewhere that had potential, or maybe you were going to modify it to make it more accessible. So, it depends which side of the argument you're on. You're looking for arguments, but I think the fact that they did have knowledge and they participated in all this certainly makes it much more clear cut that, they knew what the situation was.
100%.
Involved in the timing decisions, and they knew that there was another house on the market. They knew they had to That's why they negotiated this acceleration clause, because it was really important to these people to get the two closing dates together because of the physical limitations that they had, to move and things like that. So because it was all brought to the attention of the sellers, that makes a difference. Okay, if it was hidden, if they're more private, they may have had a tougher battle, because that's the answer you get back from it. Oh, we didn't know anything about that. We weren't made aware of it. We didn't market it as wheelchair accessible. We didn't try and convince you to buy this property because of those features or anything. So it's something to be considered for sure. I wouldn't say it'd be fatal to an argument, but I think in this case it was important.
Absolutely. Well, this brings us into our next topic, and we get asked this question all the time. It's a really important question, especially in this market. And the question is this the right time to buy a property? Is it a good idea? Is the timing right? And our agents get this question all the time. So I wanted to really spend a little bit of time and answer that question from two different perspectives. I wanted to look at an end user, and I wanted to look at it from the point of an investor and really go through the thought process of when is the right time to buy a property. And the old adage is that the right time to buy a property was yesterday, right? If we had a crystal ball, we could go back in time. Property values have really escalated a lot in the last 15 years, and in the last 4 years, they've doubled. And a lot of people are asking us for guidance on where the market is going and if it's the right time to buy. And I always say to people, you know what, you have to look at the fundamentals, right? Location, location, location. I know we've all heard that before in real estate, but it's really important that the fundamentals are there when you're looking at any property. There's certain pockets that are always in demand, certain neighborhoods. And no matter what happens to the market, there's certain streets that are very coveted, court locations, ravines, the upscale neighborhoods. And we always tend to see not a lot of properties list for sale. And I'll give you a perfect example. One of our realtors bought a house in Southeast Oakville between Morrison and Chartwell. Now, if you know Southeast Oakville, that is the prime cream of a crop area. And this house literally listed, and within 4 hours of being on the market, listed over $3 million. They had 7 offers on the property.
Wow.
Right.
That's really something, especially in that price range.
Yeah, it's uncommon, but again, it goes to speak that, the fundamentals are so important, right? And if you look at location, 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 and you buy well in the fundamentals, no matter what happens to the market, there's always going to be a demand for that specific property, because houses in that neighborhood probably go up for sale once every 15 years. So amazing example, and especially in that price range, to see multiples happen that quickly was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, that's really something. But that's it. Like, we always talk about the market in the GTA as a whole sometimes, but you really have to break it down, because there's all these mini markets in different neighborhoods, and some are more attractive than others, and some, as soon as a house comes up, like boom, there's a lot of interest, because you never know when the next one's going to come up. Because like you said before, certain places people are going to move in and they're not moving out. Like, they're not turning those properties over. They're going to stay there. That's where they want to raise their kids, and they're going to be there for a long time.
Yeah, looking at things like school districts, right? And having small kids, you're in the right school district, you're going to wait until kids are at least done school, right? That could be sometimes a 15-year waiting period that people spend in the house. And then, they have another kid along the way. Well, they're going to wait until that second or third kid finishes in the same school as well. And there's always a list of people that want to get into some of those great school districts as well. So looking at the fundamentals is really important. The other thing I always encourage buyers to do is consider how long they're going to be in the house, right? And this is also important because if you're in a property for long term, right, then you care less about what the market's doing in the short term, right? You can write out the bumps as well, and you can kind of see that over time, it is going to keep appreciating as well.
Yeah, your focus is going to be on just acquiring that one property that fills all your needs and checks off all the things that you've got. And once you're in there, and if you're going to be there while your kids are going through school, and you've got a 10 to 15 year window, the rest of the time you're not really paying attention to what the market's doing unless you get into the investor side of it. You're not really focused on it. You're just enjoying the neighborhood that you're living in, and your kids are meeting their friends, and they're in the parks and the schools that are around you, and that's the focus, right? It's the investors that keep going, that keep looking at the market to look for the, when they're talking about their next property.
Right. So as long as you're not timing the market, and you see yourself being in the property over a long period of time, then you care less about what the market is doing in the short term.
Right.
The other advice I give to buyers is sometimes it's less expensive to have a more aggressive house goal, right? Especially with lower interest rates. So, like, let's say that a young professional family with 2 kids is looking at a condo apartment, right? And there's a maintenance fee of $500 a month. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. A lot of the times I'm going to sit down with the family and say, well, listen, if we can get you into a townhouse, or if we can get you into a semi-detached, your monthly payment is going to be similar. However, you're going to have more house that you can grow into.
More physical size.
Right, exactly.
Also going to have a greater appreciation over time of the house. The value of that's going to go up a little bit faster than the condo.
100%. And that's important as well, especially in a low interest rate environment where, money's cheap, and accessibility to money is definitely there as well. So a lot of the times, we go through our planning session with our clients and show them the numbers and explain this to them. And, having that kind of advice is really important as well.
Yeah, that's where you really add value as a real estate agent. It's not just finding the house. The house, everybody can look at, see what's listed, everybody can see a sign on the lawn, but you've got to do your homework, know your client, figure out what their real needs are, and then talk to them about what their options are. And I know from talking to so many clients, there's very few people, especially when they're starting out, that buy something that they can really afford. They think they can afford one thing, but then it's if they can stretch. I think you and I are on the same page. If you can stretch a little bit, it pays off. In the short term, it might be hard, or especially to think about it when it's your first house. But if you can stretch a little bit, you get a lot more bang for your buck. You're going to be in a property you're going to enjoy more. The values are going to go up faster. You're going to be happier there and not be looking to move again, in a shorter time frame.
100%. And I mean, the one word that really comes to mind is leverage, right? And we're going to talk about that in a little while when we talk about, is it a good time to buy from an investor point of view. But I think leverage is the key here. And you can, pushing yourself, I call it leverage, right? Because you look back at the last 15 years, and anybody that's pushed themselves a little bit more and when it comes to the purchase of real estate and had that aggressive mind view has really paid off and benefited from that approach.
Well, one of the keys I think that you mentioned is the fact that we have low interest rates. So it makes it a little more feasible. Now, some people have a fear, okay, let's say I get this low interest rate mortgage right now and I'm stretching to buy what I want to buy, and I'm going to be real happy. But now I've got a 3-year term or a 5-year term on my mortgage. What happens when it comes time to renew? And if the market changes considerably and the rates are higher, and when the rates are as low as they are right now, it's not hard to say the rates could be double, right? Because when it's 2% and it goes to 4%, that's double. That's different than going from 6% to 12%. But some people just, the concept of what if my rate when I go to renew and it's at 4% instead of 2%, what do I do then?
Yeah, and I mean, you always have to be mindful of that, right? And I mean, that's why the bank, when they do their mortgage rule testing, they have stricter guidelines in place to see if you can handle a debt load at higher rates, and make sure that they pre-qualify you based on that criteria. And I mean, it's a really great system to really safeguard the integrity of what's really happening in our in our real estate market.
No, that's good, and that's a very important explanation for you as an agent to give to anybody that's on the market, so they understand that. Because like that's a question that comes up all the time. I might be able to afford it today. Can I afford the house that I now love 5 years from now when the rates go up? Okay.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. But again, when you look at the fact that, did you buy based on location, location, location? Is your property really desirable? How is future value going to be determined, right? So when you buy the right property and you keep all those fundamentals in mind, if anything were to ever happen, um, at least you would be in a position where you can recoup your money the fastest, right? And liquidity really comes to mind there too. If you buy the right house in the right neighborhood, with the guidance of the right realtor, if things go south, or God forbid, you lose your job, or something adverse happens, at least you can turn around and get the highest value for the house in the shortest amount of time, and you get your money out quickly, right? And that's part of the process, as well as thinking 3 steps ahead. It's really important.
Yeah, so it's not just a house that you're gonna be happy living in, but it's a house that's gonna be saleable at a decent market price if the time comes that you have to sell it. So that's great advice. It's a great approach.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I always work with my buyers in terms of looking at every single real estate as, you know, an investment, right? What's the future value of the property? What's the future resellability of the property? And if you kind of look at real estate from that point of view on a very fundamental level, whether it's your personal house or whether it's an investment property, um, you know, you're always going to be 3 steps ahead.
Right. And that's the right attitude to have. And I wish all the agents I deal with had that attitude, but surprisingly, they don't.
Yeah.
They're looking at, where's the next commission coming from, and not looking at it from the buyer's point of view or the seller's point of view. Like, it's their lives.
Yeah, it's you know what, we don't see this very much at Sutton Summit, but we certainly see it out in the marketplace, and it's not a good approach. And I always teach my agents that if you take care of your clients, they will always take care of you. And some agents ask me, how do I get referral business? How do I do this? How do I do that? And it's always a very simple answer. And the answer is take care of your clients, have their best interest in mind at all times, and they're going to take care of you. And I'm sure your business is no exception to that rule.
No, it's the same sort of principles, and we remind our staff all the time. We have our weekly meetings. It's something that comes up all the time. We have to remind ourselves, yeah, we're in the business of closing all these transactions. So at some point, we don't want to consider it widgets. We don't want to think, well, it's just another transaction. Each one of them is a unique transaction to our clients, and it's the only transaction that they've got going. And they don't care if we're closing 300 transactions that month. They only care about their 1 or 2, and they look at it from a different point of view. So we remind ourselves constantly, as lawyers, as law clerks. We got a great team, but we still remind each other, that's where the focus is. We have to understand our clients' needs, and we've got to work for them and make sure. And how important it is to close the transaction. When there's issues come up, we find a way to get the transaction closed. So it's important. These are where people live, and these are important things. And that's why when we do close, pre-COVID, it was always really exciting for people to say, to just hear you say congratulations and put out a hand and shake someone's hand, and here's the keys. And then they want to take a picture with you, with the team that helped them close the transaction, because that's an important thing to them. And they want to keep the pen that they signed the documents on. And, so I can't wait till we get back to doing that in person, because those are important moments. And for same thing for you as a real estate agent, right? When you when your client's actually moving in and they call you and say, David, thank you. We just love this house.
Yeah, they're important moments, and I think they're important for both sides, right? They're important, definitely important for the clients, right? But I think it's also important for the team members, right, to see how their hard work and the advice and the long hours and the evenings and weekends and all the sweat equity that they put in, how that translated to making somebody's life and moment just a little bit more special, right? So I think
Mhm.
having them part of that process, having them seeing the excitement, having them, be in that picture is so important, not only for the client, of course, that's important, first and foremost, but it's also important for the team, right? For the team to feel like they're part of that process. And I think,
Right.
I'm glad that you mentioned it, David, because it's those type of moments and the culture that you instill in your staff makes a big difference, right? It's that connection. It's that going extra mile. It's striving at every single closing to have that picture moment with your clients, right?
Right.
Is so important.
Yeah, no, it is. It's probably the thing that I miss the most because of COVID, and we're not meeting people live. We're doing video conferencing and things like that, and we're congratulating by phone or by email or on another Zoom call, but it's not quite the same. But I still feel it on the other side. People are, it's still, they're still walking in the front door. We're giving them the code to the locks, and they're walking in the front door, and they have an exciting moment, every time.
No, for sure, and they should. I mean, buying real estate is probably the biggest investments in anybody's life. It's definitely a life moment. It's a moment in time that a lot of people will never forget. And same with their investment properties. Buying that first investment property is an important milestone in a lot of people's life, not only on a personal level but also on the financial level, right?
Right. It fundamentally change how they look at their own finances and how they're going to deal with things especially when they're not looking at their home necessarily as a vehicle to make money on. There's certain people that say, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to buy a home, live in it for 3 years, and just keep flipping, and they don't care about the neighborhood so much, but they want to just keep moving and making some money on their home." Most people aren't like that. It's more the other. They'd rather, their home is where they're going to live. They're thinking a little more long term there. But then I know you and your team there are really pushing, those people take another look at the real estate market from an investment point of view, and how can you benefit? How can you get that second property? And maybe just explain the benefits of trying to get into that market and get an investment property portfolio going.
Yeah, it's so important. And I mean, topic of today's podcast is right now in this market a good idea to buy a property? And I think when you look at it from an investor point of view, you really have to look at cash flow, right? Cash flow is king, and it's so important that the house carries itself, and that you as an investor are not putting in money on a monthly basis to pay into the investment project. You definitely want the property to carry itself, and you want there to be cash flow left over at the end of the month, which adds to your financial well-being, right? And really, when you're looking at investment properties, there's a number of profit centers that you have to consider. So cash flow being one of them. But then you're also looking for appreciation, which we know over the last 15 years, every single property has, appreciated tremendously. You're using leverage, right? So you're putting in 20% down, 10% down, 5% down, and the bank is giving you the leverage by financing the other 95% or 80% of the purchase price.
With
And then the
low
other,
interest rates right now.
I'm sorry?
With low interest rates right now, so that helps the
Oh,
equation
absolutely,
big time.
100%. Yeah, that's a big factor in the equation for sure. And then the tenant that you have in the property is actually paying the mortgage down for you, right? And there's also lots of tax incentives. So lots of profit centers to consider when you're buying property, or when you're an investor and you're buying real estate for the purposes of investing. But definitely cash is king. And we get asked this question a lot: is it the right time to buy an investment property right now? And the simple answer is absolutely. And I love to give investors a breakdown of what the numbers actually look like. Because I think when you look at the numbers and you break them down, it really is evident how good of an investment real estate is. So we get asked a lot, hey, what happens if, the market crashes? How is that going to affect my investment property? And I always give the example, say you buy a property, you put 20% down. It's a $1 million house, $1 million investment property. 20% is 200,000. Okay. So you're only putting in $200,000 of your own money. If that investment property appreciates on average 4% over the next 25 years, well, after 25 years, that investment property is worth a significant amount more than what you originally paid for. So your first profit center is appreciation. The next profit center is you have a tenant in there that's paying the mortgage, and you're getting a little bit of cash flow left over at the end of every single month. So the next profit center is that the investor is actually using their own resources to pay that mortgage for you. So with time, that $800,000 mortgage that you started with gets lower and lower and lower. And after a 25-year period, there is no longer a mortgage on the property. So the tenant pays down the mortgage for you, right? The other profit center that you have is leverage, right? So you bought $1 million asset by only putting $200,000 down of your own money. So you didn't actually have to come up with 100% of the purchase price. When you buy stock, when you buy bonds, you have to put in 100% of the asset that you're buying. If you want to buy $100,000 of Bell Mobility stock, you got to have $100,000 of money to buy that stock. You can't go to the bank and say, hey, I only have 20%. Will you finance the other 80% of the stock? Right? You can't do that. So leverage is such an important part of the equation as well. And the other thing is you have tax write-offs as well when you own an investment property, which is really important on your personal side. So lots of really great profit centers when you own real estate. So if you take a look at the situation, that was with a 4% appreciation year over year, right? What happens if the market corrects? And let's say there's a crash and the market crashes by 50%, right? Which is what a lot of people have been talking about for the last 10 years is when is the big crash coming? So let me give you that same scenario with a 50% correction. You bought $1 million house, you put 20% down, that's 200,000. Let's say after 25 years, that $1 million house is now worth 500,000. The market crashed by 50%. So where are you? Where do you stand as an investor? And let me take you through the logic. So you put $200,000 down. You had a tenant in there for 25 years that was paying the mortgage. You were cash flow positive at the end of the month. Let's say you just broke even. You didn't really make any money. You broke even after all your expenses. So how does that look? So you put $200,000 down. Remember, market corrected by 50%. That house after 25 years is worth 500,000. You paid $1 million for it, right? But because you used leverage, other people's money to finance the difference, again, your $200,000 investment turned into a $500,000 asset after 25 years. So you still made.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the cash flow of the property is what paid down the mortgage during that time, etc. So at the end of the day, you're still ahead of the game.
Well, you're still ahead by 300,000. So you actually made in a 50% market correction, you still made 150% on your initial investment over 25 years.
Right. And that's a great example, knowing that the market never crashes by 50%, or it threatens to, but it's never happened here. There isn't an example that it's ever happened here.
It's never happened. And
it'll never happen at that extreme.
You know what? We all have so many investors in our book of business. I know a lot of my realtors have so many investors that they're working with on a regular basis that as soon as we see like a 6 to 7% correction, like we did in 2017, people just go in gun blazing, right? Because they want to make those returns, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as those investors go in and start buying property and that frenzy starts all over again, we're seeing newer highs being created when you look at the graph, right? And that's why when you look at trends over a long period of time, the market always moves up.
Right. And then even those corrections that happen, if it comes down 6 or 7%, it's coming down 6 or 7% from what's arguably an artificial high, from a height that it never really should have been at. And this is a correction to get it back to a norm, which is still an appreciating market, which is, especially we're talking, GTA, and we've talked about it before. People are, you could look crystal ball as much as you want, 5 years from now, 10 or 20 years from now, people are still going to want to live in the GTA. Like, Toronto is not disappearing. It's still going to be the center of Canada, with all due respect to, other cities. It's still the hub.
I would argue in the world, right? Like, not only in Canada, I mean, there's very few cities in the world that people would want their kids to grow up, right? Like, again, like clean water, clean air. It's the basics we take for granted, right? I was talking to an agent that is originally from India, and they were telling me that when they go to India and they land, that it takes their body a few days to adjust to the air pollution. And when I looked into it more, scientists are saying that when you're actually living there and breathing the air, it's like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day just by breathing the normal air outside.
Right. That's unbelievable. And then you talk about drinking water too. Like, nobody has more fresh water than Canada. So so none of those factors are going to disappear. It's always going to be a desirable place, which is why it's an expensive place to live, but it still makes sense. And once people are here, they don't want to leave. There'll be continual spread, so the area will get bigger and bigger. But it's still, people are going to want to be here. And even empty nesters that are sort of finished with living in the core of Toronto, I think, well, now it's a good time to sell, cash out, and go have retirement or semi-retirement, or go to a smaller community. They're still only moving within a reasonable driving distance of Toronto, and they're expanding some of the smaller towns and cities, but they're still within striking distance of the GTA, because that's where the rest of their family and the rest of their friends are. So I think the area will just expand, but hard to imagine 10, 20 years from now that any of this is going to stop.
Again, it comes down to fundamentals, right? Like, on a political level, on a health level, on an economic level, and it's just hard to find another country in the world that has a great education system, has a great health system, has a great international policy, and is so respected at an international scale, and so looked up to by so many different countries. And another example of that is the Toronto Real Estate Board. And Lisa Patel, the president of Toronto Real Estate Board, and John DeMichelle, who is the CEO, I mean, they're just great leaders. And what they've started is they've started a global outreach program. So they're actually going to different countries in the world and teaching them or sharing with them how Canada sort of does their organized real estate, how the MLS system works, right? Because the European system is very different in how people transact in real estate. But it's nice to know that there's countries that are looking up to what we're doing in real estate. We're leading, right? And we're leading in a really big way. And I mentioned this because it's really important. As TREB is reaching out, the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board is reaching out to these countries and having these conversations, and these people are looking at our system of how we transact. They're realizing that we're stable. They're realizing that we have a world-class real estate organization, and these people are investing even more into Canada they're trying to get closer and tie more relations to us. Like the country of France just signed an understanding with the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, and they're working really close and collaborating and trying to get the same organized real estate system out there. So, there's a lot to be proud of when it comes to how our real estate is set up and how organized we are, and the flow of information. And it's great to know that our two organizations play such a pivotal role in the setup and in that system.
Yeah, and it's really important. And it's one thing for you and I to have these conversations and know about it, but I know how hard you work at Sutton Summit to convey all this to your team, to have your training sessions with your agents, to keep them informed, with different methods that you use to stay on top with your agents and keep them in the loop too, and receive information from the agents that find things and then pass it on to everybody else. And that's an important part of being a business leader as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very fortunate, and I love the industry that we work in, and we're very heavily invested in real estate. And as a business owner, we own the real estate that we operate out of, and that's really, really important, because a lot of brokerages out there, don't talk the talk and walk the walk, and don't own their own real estate. And I know that the previous predecessors, I mean, they always wanted to own real estate. They just, it never really fell into place, and the opportunity never really materialized. But we were really fortunate to acquire a brokerage out in the Streetsville area, and they own their own real estate, and it's a beautiful building, and we were able to go ahead and acquire it about 2 years ago, and something that we're very, very proud of. And we love owning real estate.
And it's a beautiful building, and it's a landmark, and it makes a statement itself. Like, this is, you put down roots there. You got roots in the community. You're not in a place where you could be, just renting a place for a short period of time. You look like you're there forever, and you're part of right in the heart of Streetsville, right in the middle of the community. And it's a beautiful building, and it's a functional building, and it's a building, agents come and go. And I've been there for your outdoor barbecues, because you've got a place to have a barbecue and have a social gathering. Remember what those were? Social gatherings. We used to do that. So
what? Really?
we'll get back there, and I look forward to having another barbecue on the parking lot there. But it's nice that you've got that kind of space to do that. It's your own real estate.
And I know that your organization laid roots to the real estate that you guys are in a really long time ago. Mm-hmm. It's probably been the best decision that you guys have ever made.
Yeah, and we've been in the process of renovating it lately, like through COVID. We've had people in there all the time, but we're keeping it thin. We're trying to rotate people in, make sure that everybody's got their own very safe working environment, safe space and everything. But it was also an opportunity for us to do some renovations. We're in the process of fixing up our bathrooms and fixing up the kitchen, and we've improved the lighting and some of the accessibility and things like that. So we're sort of using this as a time to do that. But it's also a statement that, hey, we've been there for 40 years, but we're planning to be there for the next 40 or longer. We're not going anywhere. We're deep into the community as well.
Yeah, and what has the appreciation been over us 40 years, like in commercial real estate? I mean, it's been tremendous.
Yeah, no, it has. It's always going up. It's always going in one direction. There's a little bit, there's pauses here or there. There's a bit of a stall once in a while, but it's never really going down. There's always value in it. So that's important for anybody to consider.
Yeah.
And plus, you and us, it's an investment too. It's, the same reasons you'd be telling other people to invest in real estate. It's the same thing for us, same principles.
Yeah. Yeah, as a business owner, I mean, we're working on obtaining a line of credit against the real estate as well, and it's a substantial line of credit, and it really lets us pivot and as a business, and not really go into the bank each and every single time that we want to expand and acquire and do other and sort of investing activities. We're able to self fund those, right? So it's really important as a business owner. I mean, I'm an investor first, and it's great to have that flexibility. And the only way you're going to get that flexibility is if you have the security of real estate, right? The banks, look at you a little bit differently.
There's no question. There's no question, because they know if push comes to shove, they've always got the real estate. That's not disappearing. Whether you've got corporate guarantees or personal guarantees or other security on other assets or receivables or whatever they might be, what the lenders are really counting on at the end of the day, if something were to go bad, they can get their money back because of the real estate.
Yeah.
So that's all the main criteria.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I really wanted to talk about is if you are a business owner and you're currently renting space, is reach out and talk to our office, because there's a lot of programs out there. And I'll mention one. There's a subsidiary of Scotiabank that will finance up to 98% of the purchase price, as long as it's a company that needs to own or occupy the space. So if you're a business and you're renting, you want your own space, contact our office. There's a lot of programs in place. There's a lot of government supported programs in place that will let you buy your own real estate. The government knows how pivotal it is for businesses to invest in real estate and invest in their space, and knows what kind of leverage it could give them over time. And they really encourage that investment. So, if you talk to a conventional mortgage broker, they say 35%. That's a lot of cash flow, right? On a $3 million building, 35% is $1 million. A lot of businesses don't have that kind of liquidity to be able to put 35% down on a property. But if you can do it 96% loan to value, 95% loan to value, there's ways to own real estate. If you're a business looking to buy your own place, come talk to our office. We'll help you through the process. But it's a program that we took advantage of 2 years ago when we bought our building. We bought with 96% loan to value, and now we're in a situation where we have lots of equity just because we had an aggressive pay down schedule, and the property appreciated so much in the last 2 years that we actually have over 25% equity now in the building, which is amazing, right? So again, it's using those profit centers, it's using leverage, it's using appreciation, it's paying down your mortgage, and it's creating an equity situation. So in just a short period of time, we were able to create a large equity position with a very high leverage situation initially. So again, as a business owner, best decision I made was to purchase a beautiful landmark building 2 years ago in Streetsville. And I would encourage any other business owner out there that wants to buy real estate to come contact our office, and we can help you through it. We've just been through it. And actually, your firm was actually instrumental in closing that transaction, going through the whole process, helping us through it, helping us navigate through it. And you know what, it's best decision I've made as a business owner for sure.
Well, that's great to hear. And it's great when you can tell people do as I do, not as I say.
Yes.
And then when you're going to give an example, it's not just some other guy that did this. This is what I did. You can show them what you did in the numbers and how it worked out so beautifully for you. Yeah. And it's life-changing. And it's I congratulate you for finding that, for taking the initiative, for doing it. And I know how significant it is for you personally and for Sutton Group Summit. Like it's game changer, and it's great. And so it's great that you can then go to other people and say, hey, here's how I did it, and it's not and it works, and here are the numbers, and it should work for you the same way that it worked for me. And that's great.
Yeah. And I always say in business right now, like the trends in business is that, like, vulnerability is so important and being human is so important, right? Like, and I really, teach that to my agents as well. Is don't be afraid of making mistakes. Own up to them if you make them. Learn from them. Keep moving forward. But explain people from your point of view of how you sort of did things and how you sort of pivoted and navigated, and how you built wealth and how you forged forward, and helping them do by doing, not by saying, is so important.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example. I'm glad you raised that. Good discussion for today. That's for sure. I hope
Amazing.
people take advantage of your invitation.
Amazing. Well, I hope they do too. And it's the best way. Listen, I think you nailed it on the head when you said, no, you've been at your location for 40 years and you plan on being there for another 40 years. And I think if you purchase real estate, that's the message you send to your customers and to the marketplace, is you say, listen, you know what, we're here for the long term. We're
Right.
going to be here for a long time. We believe in our business, and you should believe in our business too.
Yeah, and that's where we're setting it up. And 40 years from now, I'm only going to be 102, so I'll be halfway through my career. But with all seriousness, we're setting it up. I have Jonathan Hakon, really well, is my partner, and he's considerably younger than me, and he's going to be around for a long time. And I don't know if he'll still be doing it for 40 years, but it'll be set up that it can go for 40 years. We have other young associate lawyers that are doing a fabulous job, and there's no reason why what we're building won't continue. So we're not setting it up that way for no reason. I might not be around anymore, and maybe Jonathan won't be around at the end of that, because it'll be passed on to the next generation. But I think as a business owner, we want to structure it that way. We're not building a business that's going to last, for the next 10 or 15 years until I retire or something like that. No, we're building, we have something. It provides a great service to the community, and it's there, and we've got deep roots in the GTA, and it's going to continue. And that's what we look at it. You got to look long term, even regardless of how long you're going to be part of that long term. You never know, but you still build it that way and think of it that way, right?
100%. Totally agree. David, great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed my time with you as always, and looking forward to next week.
Next week, we'll come up with some other good things to talk about. That's for sure.
Really looking forward to it. Everybody have a great week. Stay productive. Invest in real estate. And if you have any questions about any of the topics or any legal matters, please reach out to David Korman, amazing firm. You're always going to be well taken care of. And if you have any real estate questions, reach out to my company. Always happy to help, and we'll set you up with an outstanding realtor that's going to go the extra mile and make sure you come out on the right side of the coin when it comes to investing in real estate.
Well said, David. Look forward to next week. Take care and stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody.
Welcome to David and David on Real Estate. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the real estate market and dive deep to understand the issues affecting buyers, sellers, investors, and businesses. If you love real estate as much as we do, sit back, relax, and gain an insider's edge to the exciting world of real estate. David Gorski is a broker and the owner of Sutton Summit Realty, a powerhouse brokerage providing guidance to over 180 realtors. And David Korman is a partner at Kormans LLP, a respected law firm specializing in residential and commercial real estate transactions, with offices located in Toronto, Mississauga, and Markham.